Buenas noches a todos, bienvenidos. La verdad es un placer, un gusto muy especial de tener con nosotros a Dweck, que es rabino principal de comunidades sefaradín de Inglaterra, pero eso es aparte de ese título. Lo importante es que es una eminencia, pero además de una eminencia, es una persona que yo admiro por el hecho de que de verdad tiene un criterio muy especial, una visión muy correcta de lo que es la Torá, el judaísmo, y lamentablemente tengo que decirlo, yo veo cada día, lo veo más, cómo se distorsiona en el mundo, se rompe ese equilibrio, esos valores tan preciosos que tiene la Torá, se manipulan, se mezclan con política, con intereses. Bueno, no quiero continuar diciendo, pero justamente el Rab representa ese mensaje de dar justamente la visión correcta de la Torá, con su filosofía, con sus valores, con su equilibrio. Ojalá que, de verdad, que en el mundo haya más rabinos como Rabbi Dweck, se vería muy diferente el judaísmo y el mundo. Bueno, no los voy a entretener más, solamente quería agradecerle por estar aquí con nosotros y tener la suerte de poder oír sus mensajes tan sabios. Yo lamentablemente tengo otro evento en Judaism y me tengo que ir, me la estoy perdiendo, lo sé, voy a estar fin de semana con él, pero los dejo en unas súper buenas manos, ¿verdad?
With the Reshut of the Rav Harashi Rav Tobal, it's my honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me and for your kind words, Chacham. Thank you. Zat Hashem. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. It's an honor to be able to see you and speak with you. I want to say before I begin, the few days that I've been here, I've been here before, this is my third time, but I'm very happy because my wife, Margalit, is with me this time. She's with me. But I have to say that seeing the community has been such a chizuk and inspiration for me. And Margalit feels the same way. I saw this morning the Monte Sinai school. I toured the whole school. I spoke to the high school, the children and the young people in the high school. And every interaction that I have with all of the kahal is such derech eretz, such beauty, really. It's beautiful. And I want to tell you how honored I am to be able to share Divrei Torah with you and to be able to spend this time with you. I told the young people in the high school today, the most precious thing that you can give anyone, especially today, I think always, but especially today, is attention. It's attention. So I don't take for granted that you're here and that you're listening. I appreciate that, and I hope that I will be zochet to your attention, that it will not be for no reason. I want to go on a bit of a journey with you tonight of thought. So I'm going to take you come with me, and I'm going to walk with you. We're going to think about these things together. There is a Mishnah that I want to read with you, and I want to unpack it with you a bit. The Mishnah is in Pirkei Avot. It's in the 5th perek of Pirkei Avot, and it talks about Abraham Avinu, which is what we're reading about now. We're reading about the life of Abraham Avinu. All of the parashayot that we're reading in the Torah right now is about the life of Abraham Avinu. But it says something very strange about Abraham. Not about Abraham, but it compares Abraham to someone. And we have to understand, what I want to try and understand with you is, why does it compare Abraham to this person? And why is there a connection between them? And what can we learn from this? Who's the person that Abraham is connected to or compared with? Bil'am Harasha. Now, I'm new here. I'm not sure how many people know who Bil'am is. Do you know the story? If you know the story of Bil'am, raise your hand. If you don't know the story, yeah, you know the story? Okay, that's not bad. Okay, good. So, Bil'am to be compared with Abraham. Okay, they say, look, these are the negative things. These are negative things that are Bilam's things, and these are positive things that are Abraham's things. But what is it between? Why him? Why Bilam? I want to think about this with you. The reason that I want to think about this with you is because I think it has a great deal to do with our lives and who we are, because at the end of the day, we're the children of Abraham Abinu, and it has to do with what's going on today. Are you okay to go on this with me? Are you good with this? Yeah? Like you're going to tell me no? You're going to tell me no. Okay. So this is what we're going to look at. I'll read you the Mishnah, and I'll explain the Mishnah. Kol mi sheyesh biyado shelosha devarim halalu. The Hachamim say anybody who has these three things, these three attributes, mitalmidav shel Abraham Abinu, can consider themselves as a student of Abraham, that they learn from Abraham Abinu. And shlosha devarim ahirim, if they have three other things, mitalmidav shel Bilam harasha, they belong to Bilam's talmidim. They learn in his yeshiva. What are the things of Abraham Avinu? Three things. Ayin Tova. Ayin Tova means a person has a good eye. What does that mean? Harambam says it means that a person doesn't run after money, doesn't run after getting things. They accept what they have. They are able to manage their life within their means. Ayin Tova. The next thing is Ruach Nemucha. What is Ruach Nemucha? Ruach Nemucha is that a person is careful. They are careful about what they're responsible for. They recognize what they should and shouldn't do, and they live their life that way. And the final thing, the third thing is Nefesh Shefala. Nefesh Shefala means they're humble. They're humble. They don't think great about it. Okay. And the opposite, are the students of Bilam Rasha. And what are these things? Mitar midav shel Bilam Rasha, Ain Ra'ah. Persons looking to find and take whatever that they can, get as much as they can. Ruach Geboha, they aren't very careful. They go after whatever they want, when they want. And Nefesh Rehava means that they are very confident about themselves, let's say. Right? They're very, very arrogant. Okay. We can go into why the Hachamim say this, but we're not going to do that right now in all the details. What I want to think about with you is why? What is this comparison, and why are they connected this way? So that's what I'm going to suggest with you, and I'm going to put this over here for now, and we'll come back to it. The first thing that we have to think about, and we have to start with, is the one thing that makes Abraham different than everybody else. And there is only one major thing that makes Abraham different than anybody else, and that is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu went into a brit with Abraham. What is a brit? A covenant. Okay. But what does that mean? The truth is, we're so used to hearing that, we take it for granted. Yeah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made a covenant with Abraham. But we have to think about something. It's very strange for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to go into a covenant with anyone. Why? I'll explain to you why I'm saying that. It's very strange that God should go into a covenant with anyone. And the truth of the matter is, no other religion claims that. The Christians don't consider God going into covenant with them. There's testament, but that's very different than covenant. The Christians say, listen, if you believe A, B, C, then you're saved. That is not covenant. Covenant is you do this, and I will do this, and we go together like this, and we walk through time together. That's a covenant. It's not, if you do this, you're saved. Sign on the dotted line and you're okay. The Muslims, they have no concept of covenant. I have friends that are imams that I speak to, and I asked one of my friends who's a scholar in the Quran, I asked him, do you have an idea of covenant? Because I looked through, I didn't see anything. He said, yes, it mentions covenant in one place. I said, what? He said, the covenant of Israel, of the Jews. We have covenant. You know how many times Brit is mentioned in the Torah? How many times HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes into Brit various times? 12 times in the Torah. So it's a strange thing, but I didn't explain to you why it's a strange thing. It's a strange thing because we have to think about, what does it mean to be God? What does it mean to be God? One of the big perks, you know what a perk is? How do you say it? One of the big perks of being God is that you get to do whatever you want. The whole idea of being God is that there's nothing above you. There are no rules if you're God. No? I mean, that's what being God means. You make the rules. You don't have rules. And if God had rules, the rules would be God, not God. Because the whole idea of being God is that you are it. You're the top. You're the highest. There isn't anything above you. And if you're God, you are not compelled or controlled or motivated by anything. You're God. And because of that, Harambam writes in the Moreh Nebuchim that it's not even appropriate to ask the question, why did God create the world? Because that question assumes something, doesn't it? It assumes that there was a motivation for God to create the world. But you can't say that about God. Why? He doesn't have motivations. Because the motivations move him. But he's not moved. He's the mover. You with me? Okay. So now you can begin to understand why Brit is a problem. Because what does Brit imply? Well, not imply. What does it require? It requires that you bind yourself in rules. Now, why would God do that? For some reason, in order for God to get into a covenant, he has to agree to do things and to follow certain rules. By definition, that's what the covenant is. When he says to Avraham Avinu, I'm going to take care of you and your children and your children's children, I'm going to watch after them, I'm going to bring them to this land, he is binding himself to those rules. Why would he do that? He's God. And that means that in a certain capacity, he is deciding of his own free will. Of course, it's his freedom that he uses to decide to follow the rules, So that is something that nobody else claims. We're the only ones in our Torah that claim that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't. He does it 12 different times in the Torah. This brit with Abraham is not the first brit that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does in Torah. What's the first brit that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does? Noah. First thing, he says, Noah, I'm going to come into a brit between you, b'chol basar, all flesh. Now that's interesting because before that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not have a brit with kol basar, with all flesh. You know what the Hachamim say HaKadosh Baruch Hu was doing before he created the world? Destroying them. He was creating worlds, destroying them. Borei olamot u'mahrivan. Borei olamot u'mahrivan. That's a very strange thing to say. Why? Because he doesn't run by rules. He didn't like this world, took it away. Didn't like this one, took it away. Didn't like this one, took it away. It's an interesting thing to say why HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates worlds that he feels he needs to destroy. Why don't he just get it right the first time? But that's not for this year, that's another time. And the truth is that even this world almost didn't make it. It almost didn't make it. You know, you read Bereshit, bara Elohim et hashamayim et haaretz, and you think, wow, you know, it's a beautiful story. By the end of the parasha, he's done with it. He doesn't even want to keep it. So that's an interesting thing to remember, right? Why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu do that? HaKadosh Baruch Hu does it because he has no rules. And the important thing is, and we take this for granted, there's nothing, and this is important, this particular point, please remember this one because we're going to come back to it. There is no reason why we should expect that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should not change his mind all the time. Why shouldn't he? He's God. He doesn't have to keep anything for a very long time if he doesn't want to. He can do one thing one day and do another thing the other day. And why? Because I'm God. That's what I do. Brit is different. When you go into Brit, then you keep what you say. So if HaKadosh Baruch Hu promises something, then you can take that to the bank, as we say in English. You can rely on that. Why? Because if HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm going to do this, okay, so let me do this. But otherwise, why can't he change his mind? Change his mind. Okay. There was only one person who accepted completely that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was completely free and could do anything at any time for any reason. Do you know who that was? Bilam. Bil'am. He was the only one. And that's why, strangely enough, HaKadosh Baruch Hu talks to Bil'am. Strange, no? As a matter of fact, he's the only goy in the entire Torah that refers to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as Hashem Elohai. When Bil'am talks about God, he says, Hashem Elohai, Adonai Elohai. But only goy. So he doesn't believe in Avodah Zarah, he believes in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He talks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As a matter of fact, the Hachamim say Moshe had to specifically ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to stop talking to Bil'am. When he says, V'niflinu ani ve'amecha, at Har Sinai, by the Egel HaZahav, he goes to pray for Bnei Israel, he says, V'niflinu ani ve'amecha. We have to be separate. Me and your nation have to be different. Say the Hachamim, don't talk to Bil'am. Very strange. But Bil'am accepts this. He knows. It doesn't bother him that HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates worlds and destroys them. Of course he does. He does whatever he wants. And we hear that in the story. Let's go to the story of Bil'am for 1 minute, yeah? Let's look at the story. You know the story in general, I hope, because if you raised your hand, then I'm assuming that you know the story in general. What's the story in general? The Bnei Israel are passing through the Midbar. They're coming close to Moab, the territory. Balak is the king of Moab. And he realizes that every time they've gone to war, right, anybody has gone to war with Israel, they're defeated. So he knows he can't deal with them regular, right? He can't just go to war with them because he's going to be defeated. So he wants to try a chidush. What's the chidush? Curse them. Who is he going to get to curse? You get the top curser. And that's Bil'am. Why? Because he is, as we would say in English, he's 10 for 10. Every time he curses, the curse happens. He's got a perfect record. And because he has a perfect record, he can charge a huge amount of money for this. And that's what he does. So Balak sends messengers to Bil'am, and he says, I know, Asher tevarech mevorach, v'asher ta'or yu'ar, what you bless is blessed, what you curse is cursed. I need your help. I've got an issue. Bnei Israel, they've come out of Mitzrayim, they're wiping out the whole territory, they're coming close to me, I can't go to war with them because we're going to fail. I need you to curse them. What does Bil'am say? He said, look, it would be my pleasure. But I don't do anything without God. If he says yes, I'm in. I'll do it. If he says no, I'm sorry. I can't do anything against him. Okay, Bil'am. Now, how does the story happen? So he says, but you know what? Stay overnight. Stay here overnight, and we'll see if HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he's into it, if he's up for it, or he's not. Okay. So they stay overnight. HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes, and what does he say to Bil'am? He says, who are these people? You're God. You don't know who these people are. But Bil'am, he goes, oh, these people, they came because Bnei Israel came out of Mitzrayim. It's a very strange story. How's he tell? Why does he think that? Why is it not strange for him, for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to ask who are these people? Because he thinks HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not paying attention to these people. Why is he? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is God. Think about, you know the size of the universe? How big the universe is? How many billions and trillions of stars there are? And that around one star, there's a little planet with some animals that grew out of the planet that have whatever it is they're going on. God is going to be paying attention to these things. So Bil'am says, look, I'm sure you're not paying attention to any of it. I'll tell you, these people, oh, okay, don't curse them. They're blessed. Okay, so he gets up in the morning. He says, I'm sorry to tell you, bad news, I can't go. HaKadosh Baruch Hu won't let me go. So Balak sends more higher level people, more money to Bil'am. Now it's interesting, they knock on the door and Bil'am says, come on in. Why doesn't Bil'am say, what don't you understand about no? I said no. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said no, finished. But it's not what Bil'am says. What does he say? Let's see what he says. Why is he open to say what he says? Because he knows HaKadosh Baruch Hu can change his mind. What, just because he said no last time, he's going to say no this time? There's no rules. He doesn't have to keep up. And what happens? HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, okay, go. But you say what I tell you to say. Okay, I thought you were saying that. You see what's happening here? HaKadosh Hu acts with Bilam the way that Bilam expects for HaKadosh Hu to act. And he talks to him. So what happens? What happens is that Bilam realizes that there's one thing about God that he did not take into account. There's one thing about HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he did not take into account, and it breaks him. What is that thing? Let's hold that. Let's come back to Avraham Avinu. So what happens with Avraham Avinu? HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you know what, Avraham? I love you. Don't ask me why. You don't ask somebody why they're in love. You just know that they're in love. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I love you, Avraham. And I want to make a brit with you. And I am going to commit myself to you and to your children and their children for all time. And I'm going to give you this land. And I'm going to bring you here. And I'm going to give you children and this land. And that is my commitment to you. That's a promise. That's a brit. And Avraham accepts the brit. And that means that for Abraham, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was ready to bind himself to rules. And what does that mean? It means there's something here that was more important to HaKadosh Baruch Hu than his own sovereignty and freedom. You with me? Are you with me? Mm-hmm. You're not with me in the back. Are you with me in the back? You're not with me in the back. There's something more important to HaKadosh Baruch Hu than his own freedom as God to do whatever he wants. That allowed for him to go into brit with Avraham Avinu. What is that thing? Love. HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't create a world for nothing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates a world and he watches the world to see, is there anything in this world that I can connect to and share with? And he found that in Abraham. And for that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was prepared to bind himself to Abraham and the children of Abraham. Why the children of Abraham? It's interesting, not the students of Abraham, the children of Abraham. Because in the children of Abraham, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees the face of Abraham Abinu, that's why. The one that he loves. And that's why every time we stand in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to speak to him, what do we say? First thing, Elohei Abraham. Yitzhak Yaakov. But Abraham is the whole thing. Because in our face, he sees the face of Abraham Abinu. And he says, you, Abraham, you are open to me. You are interested in a relationship with me. You will connect with me. For that, I will bind myself. I've been waiting for you for universes and universes and universes. I created them and destroyed them. I created them and there wasn't an Abraham. But you, Abraham, I will connect myself forever. And Abraham dives right in. Astonishingly, he does. Bil'am did not imagine that HaKadosh Baruch Hu would ever do that. Why would he do that? You're God. What did Bil'am think HaKadosh Baruch Hu was doing? He's creating. Why? Because he creates. That's what he does. Why wouldn't you? That's what you do if you're God. You're creative. You create. What he didn't expect is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is looking for a connection with his creation, to share with his creation, to love his creation. And that he found in Abraham. So what happens with Moshe? Moshe is just an extension of Abraham Avinu. Why is Moshe hired? Why is Moshe sent? Moshe is sent. Harambam writes in the end of Ilchot Avodah Zarah, Ume'ahavat Adonai otanu, from God's love for us, Umishvuato shenishba Abraham Avinu, and for the oath that he swore to Abraham Avinu, Asa Moshe Rabbeinu. He made Moshe, Ushlaho, and he sent him to teach us the Torah. Why the Torah? I'll explain why in a moment. But he sends Moshe Rabbeinu because of Abraham Avinu. And he gives the Torah, and then he goes into another brit with all of the nation at Har Sinai. No? So what happens at Har Sinai? Hinei anochi koret berit. I'm establishing a brit with you and the whole people because of Abraham Avinu. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu does that. Bil'am did not expect that. He expected, okay, if I can go and find a vulnerable place and see a weakness in them, I can curse them. And every time he finds a place, he opens his mouth, Matobu ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. How beautiful are your tents, Yaakov. All of your encampments, Israel. And Balak hears this and I told you to curse them. Every time you open your mouth, you're blessing them. He said, I told you. That's what he tells me to say. But Bil'am realizes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is more interested in love and relationship than he's interested in being free. And that shuts him. And what does Moshe Rabbeinu do then? Are you with me? You hear this, yeah? That's why Hachamim compare Abraham to Bil'am. Bil'am sees HaKadosh Baruch Hu as a cosmic God that's creating and destroying, and that there's no connection and no relation. What I do today, and that's the way that Bil'am lived his life. What I do today doesn't have any implication of what I do tomorrow. Why? He's not paying attention to me. You think he cares what I have for lunch? You think he cares what I do with people? What desires I have and how it is that I live my life? HaKadosh is not looking at that. That's how Bil'am thought. You think HaKadosh cares that I do what I want? I don't care about any of those things. He doesn't care about those things. It's my life. It's how I'm living my life. I'm going to be alive today, dead tomorrow. What does it matter? This is just part of his creation. That's how Bil'am thought. And when he realized that HaKadosh Baruch Hu actually is willing to bind himself to a relationship and a brit, he said, oh, I've been living my life wrongly this entire time. Abraham understood that from the beginning. And Abraham understood, what does it mean to bind yourself? It means that you realize that to have this relationship, it is worth sacrificing certain things about your own freedom in order to be able to be connected. Yeah?
Even your son.
Anybody that you love. In other words, we all know this. We all know that if we are in a relationship with somebody that we love, whether it is a husband, wife, family, parents, children, whatever it is, we have to hold part of ourselves back in order to be able to connect with that person. Isn't that true? And that's why marriage is so serious, because it's a brit. It's not just, okay, we're going to live together. No, we're making a brit and locking ourselves together and walking through this life. And what do we say when we get married? Basically, what we say when we get married is, I have no idea what life is going to be. I have no idea what's going to happen to us. I only know one thing. I want to do it with you. That's what marriage is. And that's what the brit is. And Bil'am didn't expect that. Abraham lived for that. And that's why when HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, I want to be in brit with you, Abraham, what do you say? Abraham said, I'm in. And he realized that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was more interested in love and relationship than he was in being free to do whatever it was that he wanted to do. Bil'am wanted to live a life in where he was free to do whatever he wanted to do. And what does it mean for us to be able to live in that brit? It's not easy. We know that. It's not easy. Why? Because we want to be able to do whatever we want to do. That's why. Bottom line, let's be honest. The bottom line is, that's why we find it difficult to be in a brit. Because we find relationships problematic and difficult because we can't do whatever we want to do. We have to learn how to be in the context of another. Yes? And that's who we are. And that's why the Hachamim say, what is the Talmid of Avraham Avinu? Talmid of Avraham Avinu is Ayin Tovah. Ayin Tovah means we learn to be able to live our lives in our means. If we can do more, then we do more. But we don't break things in order to be able to take and have, just because I want it. We learn to live in a world and work within the relationships that we have to do that. Nefesh shefala, what does that mean? Or nefesh nemucha, what does that mean? It means that we just don't do everything that we want to do. We question and think, what do I want to be? Who do I want to become? Who do I want to be able to connect with? And let me live my life in those ways so that I can be able to have those values and those relationships and those connections. Ruach nemucha, what is that? It means that I'm careful about the things that I do. Bilam is the opposite. And the Hachamim saw that between the two of them because this issue of Brit was what was different between the two of them. The interesting thing about Bilam, and which is valuable, is that he was different than all the other Goyim. All the other Goyim worshipped Avodah Zarah. They weren't even looking at HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They were worshipping themselves. Bilam at least knew what was true. And he lived based on what he thought was true, without the whole Brit thing. And that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke to him. The Hachamim say there was only one other Navi in the world that rivaled or came close to Moshe Rabbeinu. Bilam. Unbelievable. But that's why. So what does Moshe do? Just to show you how powerful this is and how much HaKadosh Baruch Hu is genuinely committed to it. When Bnei Israel do their Egel HaZahav, what is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's first response? The first response is Nehenina. He says, Moshe, let me alone. V'harapi bahem, I'll be angry with them. V'chalem, I'm going to wipe them out. But he's in a Brit. Well, there's fine print for the Brit. Because the Brit is Avraham and his children. He didn't say which children. As long as I have one of his children, I'm in the Brit. HaKadosh Baruch Hu reserves the right. So what does he say? He says, Moshe, I'll start with you again. But there's a reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu hired Moshe. Moshe was meant to come to work for a moment like this. So what does Moshe say? Moshe says, Rabbono shel olam, don't be so harsh. Please. Amecha hagoy hazeh. He says, can you see, this is your people, this is your nation. You have to forgive them. And he says to him later, he says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he says, and by the way, we can't keep running like this. You can't just get angry and wipe us out every time, We need dirachim. It's not, a brit alone is not enough. We need even more than that. We need to know how you're going to behave in certain situations. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I have to tell you how I'm going to behave? It's not enough that I'm in a brit. Also dirachim you need? And that's what Moshe asks. He goes, Hodi'eni na derachecha. Tell me your ways. Tell me your derech. And what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu say? Okay, fine. I'll give you my derachim also. Hashem, El Rahum, Hanun, Er Chapayim, Rav Chesed. You can say, you recognize, I'll be merciful with you. I'll give that to you. He goes, but he leaves one place for himself, right? He says, V'hanoti et asher ahon, v'rihamti et asher arachem. Rashi says, what does it mean? I'll pardon those who I feel like pardoning. I'll give mercy to those who I feel like giving mercy to. Says Rashi, Af al pi she'eno kedai. Even though they don't deserve it. Why? Even though it's against the rules, I can do what I want. I'll pardon who I want to pardon. I'll give mercy. So that's the asterisk. There's a little star. It says, but otherwise, Moshe asks HaKadosh Hu, and he says, Ani avir kol tuvi al panecha. He says, I will do that, Moshe. And Moshe asks for more. Because what does HaKadosh Hu says? Look, I'll tell you my dirachim. I'm not going with you. You go without me. I'm not traveling with you anymore. Shalachti malach. I'm going to send a messenger on my behalf with you. What does Moshe say? No. Halo belechtecha imanu. You have to walk with us too. I have to walk with you in the mud? With these behavior, with these people? Look at them. I'm Kishya Orif. He says, I'm going to destroy it. Moshe Rabbeinu says, if you don't come with us, we're not leaving. So he hired the right person. This is what Moshe was hired for. This is his job. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Gam et hadavar hazeh asher amarta, shidbarta aseh. That too. Okay. And because of that, what does Moshe create? Yom Kippur. He comes down from that whole conversation on Yom Kippur. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, and I will live with you. And what does Moshe come with? Mishkan. What is the Mishkan? HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you have to build an apartment for HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the neighborhood. I'm coming to live with them. You see, so Moshe understood from Abraham that if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is interested in Brit, it means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is interested in connection. And I want all of us to hear that. Because sometimes we forget that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to be connected with us in our life. That He's interested in our success. He made us. Nobody is more interested in our success than the one who made us. Nobody wants to walk with us together than Him more. And that's something that we can hold because we're all children of Abraham Avinu. And we are all part of the Brit. And it is there for us if we want it. Now it's true, we can live also in the fine print and just say, look, okay, the Brit for the general people, not me. But what are we losing when we say that? When we say that, we live in a world that is neither here nor there, that is random, like Bilam. What's here today, not there tomorrow. What I know now, not going to happen tomorrow. And that's the world that we live in, let's be honest. Does anybody know what's going to happen tomorrow? We don't know what's going to happen tonight. We don't know what's going to happen after. We don't know. We bank on statistics. We hope that things are going to happen, right? But we've all been in situations where we've been surprised. In that world, it's the relationship that holds us. Because when the world starts to go like that, we want the constant of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in our lives. And if you question, and I want to ask you to hear this bit, if you question the reality of that Brit, recognize that the only reason that you are sitting here, now, in this knis, as Jewish people, thinking about Torah, 3,000 years after we received it, 2,000 of those years we were roaming around the entire world with the entire world trying to kill us. We shouldn't be here. It's an insanity that we are here comfortably in this knis, listening to Divrei Torah and thinking about our lives as Jewish people, living lives as Jewish people, 3,000 years later, after 2,000 years of roaming all over the world with the world trying to destroy us, with our hands tied behind our backs. You're going to tell me, that happens? You show me where else it's ever happened in the world. It is a nes. And it is only a nes because of a brit that HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised to Abraham Avinu. And that it is still alive till this minute. And it is available to each and every single one of us if we wish to live it. Because it doesn't just happen. There is nobody else in the world. And that is why the world gets very nervous when the Brit starts to become so clear that anyone can see it. Remember, what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu promise Abraham? The land. And we came back home. And people are not happy with that. Because it's heavy. Because if those people, after 2,000 years of persecution and fighting for their lives, have not only not died, they've thrived, and they've come back home to the same address that they left 2,000 years ago. That's even difficult for us to hold, because it's hard to see that truth right in front of us when it was told to us 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. That's the Brit. It's real, and it is alive till this minute. And that's what broke Bilam, because he didn't expect that HaKadosh Baruch Hu would lock himself into this promise that we are all literally living right now, and that is available for any single one of us to live. Because the reality is, the world is unpredictable. Life, completely unpredictable. That's the way HaKadosh Hu made it. The one thing that you can rely on and bank on is the Brit. And how do we hold it? That's what the mitzvot are. And that's what the Torah is. And that's what Am Yisrael has held on to for all of this time. And we should look at it not as an intrusion to our life, not as something that's coming from the outside and asking us, do this, bind yourself. Why? Because I want to do what I want to do. It's not about that. It's about love and relationship and connection, and being able to hold that and realize that. A mitzvah is not an intrusion in our life. A mitzvah is our life. It's who we are. It's what we've always done. And we do it because we love. It's the way we should do it anyway. And in those things we live. And we find strength. And it's really beautiful, because without those things, we wouldn't be here. That's the truth. It's really the truth. Think about it. Every single one of us, however it is that we hold, we keep, we don't keep, you can trace back not more than 3-4 generations to the people that we're keeping. And that's the reason why we're still here. Okay. So then we look at this. I'm just going to read the end of the Mishnah for you, which I didn't read. So it says, what's the difference between the Talmidim of Bilam and the Talmidim of Abraham? It says, Talmidav shel Abraham Avinu uchlim ba'olam hazeh v'nochalim ba'olam haba. Because they have this relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they have this bond, they don't just live in this world where they're developing, they come into a place in where they can just be with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's what we call olam haba. And how do we say that? How do we know that? They listen to the pasuk that they quote. Shnei emar mishle le'anhil ohavai yesh. I give who? Ohavai. The ones I love, the ones who love me and the ones I love, yesh. Something that they can hold on to, something that's true, something that's real. Bilam, when he dies, like he said. That's his own definition of his own life. I'm living, and tomorrow I'm going to die, so I might as well live my life as I want to. But for Abraham, it was about much more, and for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it was about much more. So these are things I want to simply close in connection to what's happening today. It's very difficult for us to watch and to know and to feel what is going on with us and our nation. And a lot of times, I'm sure, like me, you feel despair. How many young soldiers are going to die? How long are those hostages going to sit in captivity and suffer? How long are we going to have to watch this precious little nation that just started bear the brunt and weight of 7 different places of war? It's terrible. But I also want to remind you something. We're fighting this war back home after 2,000 years of not being there. Do not forget that. It's difficult. Unfortunately, difficulty is not something that's strange to the Jewish people. It's not the first time that we've experienced something like this. And we will come through this too, as we have come through for 30 centuries. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't be pained. Of course we're pained. It's us, it's our family, it's our home, it's our brothers and sisters. We will come through. We have to know that. And we have to recognize it's not the first time that we've seen something like this. So, Chizku v'imtzu. Be strong. Hold to the brit. Remember the things that are real and true for Am Yisrael. And that is genuinely the Torah and the mitzvot and our identity. It's what it's always about. And Yehi Ratzon, it should be His will that we should see the end to all of the suffering and all of the difficulty, that we should see happiness and Yeshua and strength, and the hostages freed, and Am Yisrael in peace. Be'ezrat Hashem. Amen. I don't know if we want to do any questions, but I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any questions. And I don't know, what is that noise? Is that me? Is that my phone? I don't know. Yes. But anybody who needs to go, by all means. I don't want to hold anybody captive. Yeah.
So, when you talk about the brit with Abraham Avinu, it comes like a little bit as a shock that part of this brit is that he tells Abraham that his children will be exiled in Egypt for 400 years. Where does that come from? And
how does that? Why does that come in?
Why is part of the brit or God's love?
Yeah. So there's a pasuk in the Nevi'im that says, "Rak etchem yadati mikol ha'amim." Only you have I had this relationship with over all of the nations. Therefore, I don't want to say punished, but I have caused you distress and difficulty. Why? Because like the worlds that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is creating and destroying, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu feels that things are failing, He can just destroy them, shut them down. But when He locks Himself into a promise and things fail, He can't just shut them down. He needs to teach them. And they need to go through difficulties. So this is a very awkward truth, but I think it is a truth nonetheless. We learn things through suffering that we otherwise would never come to without. And it's a very difficult and very awkward truth. And I'm very careful to say that because some suffering is so terrible that some people don't make it through. But there is a reality, there is a truth to it. And that is that there are certain things that difficulty and suffering bring to us that we otherwise would never come to know and never learn from. And that is necessary. And that's why the Hachamim say slavery is necessary for freedom. If you don't know what it means to be a slave, you don't understand what it means to be free. And there's a cycle to that. There's a recognition of that. But that's why, for example, there's a story in the Gemara, I think it's one of the most beautiful stories. It says that Rabbi Yohanan was sitting with his Talmidim. And an old goy walked past them. And Rabbi Yohanan was one of the greatest Hachamim of the Talmud. He was sitting with his Talmud. He stood up completely when this older goy passed by. And the Talmidim said, Hacham, for him. And he said to them, Mi yada'a kama harpatche avu alohi. How do you know how much suffering that man has gone through in 70 years of his life? Imagine how much he's learned. Stand for that. Rabbi Yohanan stood for that. So there's an element of that in it. Yeah. Yes.
Can you repeat again, please? What did Abraham did that he was the one who God chose to love, to start the love?
That's a very good question because on the one hand, we have Mesorah about what Abraham did. On the other hand, is nothing written in the Torah about it. Nothing. All we know in the Torah is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu fell in love with Abraham Avinu. And if you've ever been in love, I'm not going to ask you, you don't have to answer the question, but if anybody has ever fallen in love, you know that you can't explain that. It's just how you feel about this person. It's what your connection with this person. And that's how HaKadosh Baruch Hu felt about Abraham. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu feel that way about Abraham? So we have Mesorah. And that is that Abraham lived his life searching for truth. Not just because he was an academic, because he wanted to connect to what was real. Because he saw people all around him living lies. And to him, it kept becoming more evident that they were living lies. And he wanted his life to be real. So he kept searching and searching and searching. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw that, and that's why he was doing it, not just as an academic endeavor to see, because he enjoyed thinking, it opened up for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to speak to him. That's what the Mesorah is. But there's a value that the Torah doesn't say why. Because there's something about, I love you. Why? Because I do. That's it. Yeah. Yes.
I time understanding how Bilam could get the level of prophecy almost as Moshe, when he had such a misguided notion of what God is. And especially the freedom part, it kind of sounds weird to me after learning about the Aristotelic God of not unmutability, that he doesn't change at all. So having this God that changes every time according to his mood, he wants to destroy a world, he wants to build a world, it's hard to meet a phantom.
Yeah, it's a very, very good question, which I don't want to not answer, but it's a deep and broad question that if I answer it now in a few minutes, I'm not going to give you a proper answer. So I'm only going to give you like headings, and then I don't know if I'll see you again, but I can discuss with you a little bit more. It's important to recognize that anytime that we talk about God, we're borrowing terms because we're talking about something that is not definable, right? But in that, it's also something that is, the all is possible. And in the all that is possible is anything. At any time, at any moment. Well, time. What's time for God? Well, he created it and whatever, right? So we have to deal with the fact of creation itself when we're talking about God. Fine. So there are certain paradoxes that we recognize and accept. We're not as bothered by paradoxes as Western thinkers and Aristotle, who was very bothered by paradox. We don't have as much problem as he did with those things. We're more Eastern in that sense. And Bilam was going on what it was that he observed. You can't know that about HaKadosh Baruch Hu until HaKadosh Baruch Hu extends it to you. Because what is observed is a random world.
Also, the conversation with God is a little...
It's random. It's random. That was one thing the Hachamim said. What was different between Bilam and Moshe, Moshe could say, I want to talk to you. And God would respond. Bilam had to wait. Say, okay, if he talks to me, I'll tell you. If he doesn't talk to me, what can I do? And it would happen upon him. That's why I say they were like acquaintances. Oh, Bill, how are you doing? I want to talk to you about something. That's how HaKadosh Baruch Hu would talk to Bilam. Yeah? So that was it. He didn't have, but when he spoke to him, there wasn't a lot of barrier because Bilam didn't have those problems, right? He was able to take away all of the self, deception that would otherwise keep him from engaging with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Does that make sense? Yeah. I'm sorry, I can only say. Yeah, Steve.
When God made the pact with Abraham, was it for eternity?
Yeah.
So my second part of the question is...
I mean, whatever eternity is, but yeah.
Is for the rest of time.
Yeah, yeah.
Always with B'nai Israel.
Right, yes.
So for Abraham, would you consider it an easier task for God? I know he's God, but the second part of the question is, was it easier for Abraham because he was living for the time and he could do his pact easier? Because Hashem also has to do it for the...
When you say easier than... When you say easier than what?
Was it easier for Hashem to respect the pact than the human, or is it hard for him because he has to do it for eternity?
So I don't know that it's hard or easy for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's just the choice that he makes. So that's why I'm not talking so much about difficulty. I'm talking about the fact that for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to do that is really an astonishing thing given who he is. Right? Why would God, who is not controlled or determined or pushed or motivated by anything, lock himself in to some biped on a planet, right? It's the idea behind HaKadosh Baruch Hu doing. So it's not necessarily difficult for HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Well, that person who had it, he did it for 180 years.
Yeah, but he's doing it.
He didn't have to do it for the rest of his...
But for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like it says, time is not what it is for us, right? So he's running the simulation because he wants it to succeed, right? I mean, that's, if you're creating it, you want it to be able to go for the long haul. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu's in. He's in. That's his. I don't know about. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't necessarily call it difficulty, but because I know what you mean by that. But it's yes, HaKadosh Baruch Hu definitely committing for the long run. Yeah. Okay. Last question. Yes.
So you talked about the breed.
Yes.
And you said HaKadosh Baruch Hu is still Kiyum.
Yeah.
And but what was our part in the Berit? I mean, to follow the ways of Hashem. I know that the Berit is first with Abraham, a family,
Yeah.
a family.
Yeah.
And then in Har Sinai,
Yeah.
it's through the Torah.
Yeah.
So
What is our part?
yeah, our part in
It's not just not keeping the Torah. First of all, the entire people would need to choose that. And that's something I appreciate the question, because it's something very important for us to recognize. We make the mistake of thinking sometimes that the only reason we're still here is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu kept his side of the brit, but we didn't. But that's not true. As a people, right, if you look at Am Yisrael as a corporation, the corporation has chosen to keep it. And we have chosen it over and over again. And think about how strange that is. Because given what we've been through over the last 2,000 years, including the Second World War, given what we've been through, it would be completely understandable for all of us as a people, for the corporation to say, you know something? I think we're done. We're done. But we didn't do that. Individuals, yes. Individuals have done it throughout the whole period. But as a corporation, as an entity, we keep choosing it. And that means there's something in the people that recognize it, that this is not just brutality. There's something of love in it. As difficult and awkward as it may be, there's something about it that we as a people recognize, and we hold on to it. So it's, I think, a very important thing to recognize. That was going to be the last question, but only because you're raising your hand, I'm going to answer this one. Yeah, go ahead. But this is the real last one. Okay, yeah.
When you say that we have chosen and that the corpus of Israel keeps on choosing it, and you see that maybe only 15% of the Jewish population thinks that the Torah is something meaningful, and 85% does not. In which way do you feel that this other 85% is choosing because they want to live in Israel? Or
I don't know if the other, I think that any element of a Jew recognizing their connection to the people, because I think this is important. If there is anything that is fundamentally Jewish, it's the people. It's the Jewish people. Because remember, the Brit was not made with Avraham and his students. The Brit was not made with Avraham and the people who followed his philosophy. It was made with Abraham and his children, his family. And that ultimately is what it is that the Brit lies in. In the depth of it is what the Brit lies in. Now, of course, there is an element of it that requires Torah and mitzvot. If we want to be actively engaged in the Brit, then yes, of course it's Torah and mitzvot. There's no question about that. It's very clear. But the love that when the Torah says that we have to love Am Yisrael, it doesn't say unless they're keeping this mitzvah or that mitzvah and so on and so forth. You have to love Am Yisrael. It's in the people. And that's why I was saying, I don't remember where I was saying it anymore, but I said it in the school this morning. Everybody knows the halakha. I said it by your house, right? Everybody knows the halakha, right? If you have a Jewish person, theoretically, you have a Jewish person who has no idea that they're Jewish. First of all, what makes a Jewish person? A Jewish mother, which for a religion is a very strange criteria, right? I mean, you should believe in certain things to be. No, your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish. So I was told the story by Chaim's house. I know a person who called me, his name is Santiago. He's from Spain. He's studying in Cambridge. He's doing a double doctorate, and I don't know whatever he's doing. And he was studying Christian mysticism. And he called me because he wanted to learn about Jewish mysticism. Okay. He has no concept of being Jewish. He doesn't know he doesn't know anything about being Jewish. And I'm talking to him, and I'm explaining to him. And I said, at one point, I said, Santiago, why do you want to know about this? He said, I don't know, because my grandmother and my great-grandmother is Jewish. I said, your grandmother on which side? He said, my mother's side. I said, Santiago, you're Jewish. He goes, no, I'm not. I said, yeah, you're Jewish. Now, if Santiago, just to give you an idea, right, if he wanted to marry a Jewish girl, and he had idim, and he had witnesses, and he said, Hare'at mekudesh, they're married. They need a get. He knows nothing. He doesn't even think he's Jewish. Why am I saying this to you? Because it's in the people. Ultimately, it's in the people. So the choosing usually is conscious, but any element of the Jewish people that is interested in their Jewishness, in being part of the Jewish people, that's meaningful. It may not be the best, but it's certainly meaningful, especially in this world right now. And that is something that we have to recognize and care about and love and recognize. Right? So unless the Jewish people are interested in destroying the Jewish people, which unfortunately there are Jews like that, if they're not one of those Jews, you have to love them. That's a mitzvah.